WNBA Finals. And so I'll leave it there. I mean, I'm just obviously disheartened. I'm a human too. I have a family. I have 2 kids who are devastated by these comments. And so all I'll say is just, it's obviously been a tough week.
WNBA Finals. And so I'll leave it there. I mean, I'm just obviously disheartened. I'm a human too. I have a family. I have 2 kids who are devastated by these comments. And so all I'll say is just, it's obviously been a tough week. The Women's National Basketball Association is confronting what may be the most significant challenge in its 27-year history. After years of steady growth culminating in a breakthrough 2024 season marked by record attendance, unprecedented media attention, and lucrative new television deals, the league now faces an existential threat that few saw coming. A heavily funded international basketball league backed by seemingly unlimited resources from the Middle East has emerged as a direct competitor for the WNBA's most valuable asset, its star players. What began as industry rumors has rapidly evolved into a full-blown crisis, with reports indicating that multiple high-profile athletes are seriously considering offers that dwarf anything available in American professional women's basketball. This isn't merely another case of WNBA players supplementing their income with overseas contracts during the offseason, a practice that has been standard for decades. This represents something fundamentally different and far more threatening. A well-capitalized rival league designed specifically to poach the biggest names in the sport and establish itself as the premier destination for elite women's basketball talent. The financial firepower being deployed is comparable to what Saudi Arabia's public investment fund brought to professional golf with El Eva Golf, which successfully lured numerous PGA Tour stars with guaranteed contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The same strategy is now being applied to women's basketball, and the WNBA appears woefully unprepared to counter it. To understand the gravity of this situation, one must first grasp the enormous disparity between WNBA salaries and what this new international competitor is reportedly offering. Under the current WNBA collective bargaining agreement, which runs through 2027, the maximum salary for a player is approximately $250,000 annually, while the minimum salary for a rookie sits around $76,000. The league's salary cap for the entire roster of a team is approximately $1.46 million. These numbers, while representing improvements from previous years, pale in comparison to what athletes in major men's sports earn, and they're absolutely dwarfed by the figures now being discussed in connection with this new overseas league. Reports emerging from multiple sources suggest that this international venture, which insiders have referred to as Project B due to the secrecy surrounding its official launch, is prepared to offer baseline salaries of approximately $2 million for role players, athletes who might earn between $80,000 and $150,000 in the WNBA. 4-star players. The numbers become almost incomprehensible by current WNBA standards. Mid-tier stars could potentially command $5 to $10 million annually, while the league's top attractions are reportedly being presented with offers that could exceed $100 million in guaranteed money over multi-year contracts. Some of the most aggressive rumors suggest that the league's marquee signing could receive as much as $200 million. These aren't just incremental increases in compensation. They represent a complete restructuring of the economic landscape of women's professional basketball. A player earning $100,000 in the WNBA would need to play for 20 years to accumulate the same gross earnings as a single season at the $2 million baseline in this new league. The mathematical reality is stark and undeniable. No amount of loyalty, patriotism, or commitment to growing the sport domestically can easily overcome this level of financial disparity. Professional athletes have notoriously short careers, and the opportunity to secure generational wealth in a single contract is incredibly difficult to turn down, regardless of other considerations. The situation is made even more challenging by the fact that many WNBA players already spend their off-seasons playing overseas because their WNBA salaries alone are insufficient to provide long-term financial security. Unlike their counterparts in the NBA, where even minimum salary players can earn millions annually and achieve financial independence within a few seasons, WNBA athletes have historically needed to work year-round, playing in demanding foreign leagues during what should be their off-season, simply to earn a comfortable living. This new development asks them to consider making that overseas commitment their primary focus, rather than a supplementary income stream. Sophie Cunningham's reported decision to pursue an opportunity with this new international league represents a watershed moment. Cunningham, a guard for the Phoenix Mercury, has become one of the WNBA's most recognizable and marketable players, not solely because of her on-court performance, but due to her engaging personality, strong social media presence, and genuine connection with fans. She represents exactly the type of player the WNBA needs to retain during this period of growth, someone who can attract and maintain audience interest beyond just the most dedicated basketball fans. Reports indicate that Cunningham has secured a contract worth several $1 million annually, a figure that would exceed her cumulative career earnings from her 6 seasons in the WNBA. The symbolism of her departure cannot be overstated. If a player of her caliber and marketability is willing to leave the league at what should be the prime of her career, it sends an unmistakable message to every other WNBA athlete. The economics of staying loyal to the American League no longer make sense when significantly better options exist elsewhere. Cunningham's situation also highlights a broader issue within the WNBA's compensation structure. She is not among the league's absolute top tier of superstars. She's never been an All-WNBA first-team selection or an MVP candidate, yet she's popular, talented, and valuable. In other words, she represents the upper middle class of WNBA talent. If this international league can successfully recruit players at her level with multi-million-dollar offers, it suggests they have sufficient resources to pursue virtually anyone in the league. The message is clear. This isn't a targeted effort to sign 1 or 2 marquee names for publicity purposes. This is a comprehensive recruitment strategy designed to build a genuinely competitive league by systematically offering superior compensation across the entire roster. Furthermore, Cunningham's departure may trigger a cascade effect. Professional athletes closely monitor what their peers are doing, and when they see someone securing life-changing money by making a move, it naturally causes them to reconsider their own situations. Other players who might have been content with their WNBA salaries when no alternatives existed will now question whether they're leaving enormous amounts of money on the table by staying. The psychology of this situation heavily favors the international league. Once a few prominent players make the jump, others will feel increasingly comfortable and even pressured to do the same. If Sophie Cunningham's departure is a serious problem for the WNBA, the possibility of losing Caitlin Clark would be nothing short of catastrophic. Clark, who completed her rookie season with the Indiana Fever, is arguably the most significant figure in women's basketball today. Her final college season at the University of Iowa generated television ratings that rivaled and sometimes exceeded NBA playoff games. She brought unprecedented mainstream attention to women's college basketball, and her arrival in the WNBA created a similar surge in interest at the professional level. Attendance at Fever games and at opposing arenas when the Fever visited reached historic levels. Television ratings for games featuring Clark set records. She is, quite simply, the player who casual sports fans came to watch, and her presence in the league was seen as a cornerstone of the WNBA's ability to capitalize on its momentum and reach a broader audience. Now, according to multiple reports from basketball insiders and international sports media, Clark is being presented with a contract offer from this new Middle Eastern-backed league that could be worth anywhere from $50 million to $200 million in guaranteed compensation. The wide range in reported figures likely reflects the fact that negotiations are ongoing and details remain fluid. But even the conservative end of that estimate represents a sum of money that would be impossible for the WNBA to match under any realistic scenario. Clark's current WNBA rookie contract pays her approximately $76,000 annually. Even when she becomes eligible for a maximum contract after a few seasons, she would earn roughly $250,000 per year. To accumulate $50 million in WNBA salary alone would require 200 years of playing at the maximum salary. Level of financial comparison is so lopsided that it almost defies rational analysis. From a purely economic standpoint, Accepting such an offer would be one of the most obvious decisions any professional athlete has ever faced. The gap between what she can earn in the WNBA versus what's reportedly being offered overseas isn't a matter of one option being moderately better than the other. It's a difference between achieving generational wealth that could support her family for decades versus earning a comfortable but modest professional salary. What makes Clark's situation even more complicated is that she would be walking away from something significant if she were to leave. The opportunity to build a lasting legacy as the player who transformed the WNBA and women's professional basketball in America. There's genuine value in being a pioneer, in being remembered as the athlete who elevated an entire sport in your home country. Clark has the potential to be for women's basketball what Michael Jordan was for men's basketball. Not just a great player, but a transcendent figure who changed the sport's cultural significance. That kind of legacy has its own form of value, both in terms of long-term endorsement potential and in terms of personal satisfaction and historical importance. However, asking a 22-year-old athlete to sacrifice potentially hundreds of millions of dollars for the sake of legacy and loyalty to a league that pays her a fraction of her market value is an enormous ask. It's the kind of decision that's easy for others to have opinions about, but incredibly difficult for the person actually facing it. The WNBA and its supporters can appeal to Clark's sense of duty to the sport, her desire to inspire young American girls, and her connection to her home country. But those intangible benefits have to be weighed against the very tangible reality of financial security, not just for herself, but for her entire extended family for generations. Commissioner Cathy Engelbert finds herself in an increasingly untenable position as this crisis unfolds. Engelbert, who took over as WNBA commissioner in 2019 after a distinguished career in business, including serving as CEO of Deloitte, inherited a league that was stable, but struggling to achieve significant growth. Her tenure has seen some notable successes, including new television deals with major networks, increased investment from team owners, and improvements in travel conditions for players. The 2024 season, driven largely by the arrival of Clark and other talented rookies, represented the best moment in league history in terms of visibility and mainstream interest. However, Engelbert has also faced mounting criticism from players, media, and fans throughout the season. The issues raised have been numerous and serious. Multiple players, including stars like Nafi Sakalyer of the Minnesota Lynx, have publicly criticized the league's leadership for what they perceive as inadequate responses to player safety concerns. The unprecedented attention on the league in 2024 brought with it increased scrutiny, larger crowds, and unfortunately, incidents of fan harassment and aggressive behavior toward players, particularly toward Clark herself. Players felt that the league office was slow to respond, failed to implement adequate security measures, and generally seemed unprepared for the intensity of attention that came with the sport's growing popularity. Beyond safety issues, players have expressed frustration with what they see as the commissioner's disconnect from the day-to-day realities of life in the WNBA. The salary structure, which Engelbert has defended as reflecting the league's current revenue and business model, has become an increasingly sore point as players watch the enormous sums of money flowing through the sport from television deals, sponsorships, and ticket sales, while seeing minimal increases in their own compensation. The argument that the league needs to grow before player salaries can substantially increase rings hollow to athletes who feel they're the ones generating that growth, but not benefiting proportionally from it. Engelbert has also been criticized for her handling of various controversies throughout the season, including her responses to questions about the racial dynamics within the league and the sports fan base. Some of her comments were perceived as tone-deaf or dismissive of legitimate concerns raised by players about the harassment and racist behavior they experienced as the league's profile grew. In an era when athletes increasingly expect their league leadership to be vocal advocates for player welfare and social justice, Engelbert's more corporate cautious approach has left many players feeling unsupported. Now, with the very real possibility that the league could lose its biggest stars to international competition, Engelbert faces what may be the defining challenge of her tenure. The question being asked in basketball circles is simple and brutal. If the WNBA loses Caitlin Clark to an overseas league, how can Cathy Engelbert possibly remain as commissioner? The optics would be devastating. The most important player in the history of the league walking away during what should have been a triumphant period of growth would be seen as a fundamental failure of leadership. Rumors of Engelbert's potential resignation or removal have intensified in recent weeks. Sources close to the league's board of governors suggest that emergency meetings have been held to discuss the crisis and evaluate options. Some team owners who have invested significant capital in their franchises based on projections of continued growth are reportedly furious that the league wasn't better prepared for this type of competitive threat. Others are questioning whether the current leadership has the vision and creativity necessary to navigate the dramatically changed landscape of women's professional basketball. The challenge for Engelbert or any commissioner in this position is that the WNBA's fundamental economic structure makes it nearly impossible to compete with a league backed by effectively unlimited sovereign wealth. The WNBA operates within the financial realities of a still developing women's sports market in the United States. The league is not yet profitable on its own, requiring ongoing financial support from the NBA. Revenue from ticket sales, television contracts, and sponsorships has been growing, but remains modest compared to established men's sports leagues. The idea that WNBA could suddenly match 8-figure salaries for its stars simply isn't realistic given the current business model. This creates an impossible situation for league leadership. Engelbert cannot magically produce the revenue needed to compete with Saudi oil money, yet she will likely be held responsible when players leave for obviously superior financial opportunities. It's a classic case of being set up for failure, blamed for a problem that may have no solution within the existing constraints of the league's economics. Whether that's fair or not may be beside the point. In professional sports, commissioners are ultimately judged by results, and losing your league's biggest stars to a competitor would be considered an unacceptable result regardless of underlying circumstances. To fully understand what the WNBA is facing, it's essential to recognize that this situation is part of a much larger pattern of Saudi Arabian investment in global sports. Over the past several years, Saudi Arabia has emerged as one of the most aggressive and well-funded players in the international sports landscape, using its enormous sovereign wealth to acquire or create properties across multiple sports. The most prominent example, and the one that provides the clearest blueprint for what may be happening in women's basketball, is Live Golf. Launched in 2022 with backing from Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund, Live Golf directly challenged the PGA Tour by offering guaranteed contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars to top golfers. Stars like Phil Mickelson, Dustin Johnson, Brooks Koepka, and others left the PGA Tour for Live Golf despite significant criticism and the social stigma associated with the Saudi government's human rights record. The financial incentives were simply too large to ignore. Mickelson reportedly received a deal worth $200 million, while Johnson's contract was estimated at $125 million. The PGA Tour initially resisted and even suspended players who joined Live Golf, but the financial pressure eventually forced a dramatic reversal. In 2023, the PGA Tour announced a framework agreement to merge with Live Golf, essentially admitting that it could not compete with Saudi money and needed to find a way to coexist. While the details of that merger are still being negotiated and face regulatory scrutiny,